I never thought I'd end up bleeding on Thanksgiving, but life has a way of teaching you that the people you love the most can also hurt you the deepest. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and I'm 63 years old. I've lived through 3 marriages, 2 bankruptcies, the death of my youngest daughter, and more betrayals than I care to count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what my own son would do to me, what his wife would do, and how I'd finally find the strength to make them both pay for it. Before I tell you how I ended up in an emergency room on Thanksgiving night with blood running down my face and a smile on my lips, I need you to understand something. I wasn't always this cold. I wasn't always calculating. There was a time when I believed in family above all else, when I would have given anything, my money, my home, my dignity, to keep my son happy. That's exactly what they counted on. And that's exactly why I had to destroy them. If you're watching this from your living room, your kitchen, maybe even your car right now, leave a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. Because I want to know who's listening. I want to know who else out there has been pushed so far that they finally pushed back. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been told you're selfish for protecting what's yours, then you need to hear this story. You need to stay until the very end, because I promise you, this gets worse before it gets better, and then it gets so much better than you could ever imagine. Make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this one, stories about people like us who refuse to be victims anymore. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Not Thanksgiving. That was just the performance, the grand finale. No, this started almost 2 years earlier, on a cold February morning when my son Daniel showed up at my door with that woman on his arm. I was in my garden when I heard the car pull up. I'd been out there since dawn, pruning the rose bushes I'd planted when Daniel was just a boy. My hands were covered in soil, my knees aching from kneeling too long on the cold ground, but I didn't care. The garden was mine. The house was mine. Everything I had, I'd built with my own 2 hands after my second husband died and left me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. Daniel got out first. He was 34 then, tall and handsome in that careless way that made me think of his father, my first husband, the one who actually loved me before the cancer took him. But when I saw the woman step out of the passenger side, something in my chest tightened. She had this smile, this practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name was Vivian Hartley, and from the moment she walked up my driveway in her designer heels and oversized sunglasses, I knew she was trouble. "Mom!" Daniel called out, waving. "Come here, I want you to meet someone special." I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over, my heart doing that stupid hopeful thing it always did when Daniel paid me attention. He'd been distant for years, ever since he graduated college and moved to the city. Our phone calls had become shorter, his visits less frequent. So when he showed up unannounced with a woman he called special, I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. Vivian extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Mrs. Whitfield, Daniel has told me so much about you. It's wonderful to finally meet you." Her voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that came from expensive private schools and country club luncheons. She looked me up and down, and I saw it, that flicker of judgment in her eyes as she took in my dirt-stained clothes, my grey hair pulled back in a messy bun, my house with its slightly peeling paint and overgrown hedges. "Call me Eleanor," I said, shaking her hand. It was limp, cold. Like holding a fish. They stayed for lunch. I made sandwiches and listened as Daniel told me they'd been dating for 6 months, that he was in love, that she was the one. Vivian sat at my kitchen table touching everything, running her fingers along the edges of my grandmother's china, picking up the salt shaker like she was appraising it at an auction. "This is a lovely home," she said, but the way she said lovely made it sound like an insult. So much space for just one person. That should have been my first warning. But I was so desperate to have my son back in my life that I ignored it. I smiled and nodded and asked her about her family, her job, her interests. "She worked in marketing," she said. "Her parents lived in Arizona, retired, wealthy. She had a sister in California. Everything about her was polished and perfect and felt completely fake." After they left, I stood in my kitchen and felt uneasy. I couldn't name it then, couldn't put my finger on what bothered me. But looking back now, I realize it was the way she'd looked at my house. Not with admiration or curiosity, but with ownership. Like she was already mentally redecorating, already planning how to take what was mine. 6 months later, they were engaged. Daniel called me from a restaurant where he'd just proposed, and I could hear Vivian squealing in the background. I said congratulations. I said I was happy for them. I offered to help with the wedding in any way I could. And that's when everything started to go wrong. Vivian wanted a big wedding. $40,000 worth of big. And somehow, without me even understanding how it happened, I became responsible for paying for half of it. Daniel called me crying one night, saying Vivian's parents could only contribute so much, that he'd already maxed out his credit cards on the engagement ring and the honeymoon deposit, that they couldn't afford to get married without my help. "Mom, please," he begged. "This is my one shot at happiness. After everything I've been through, don't I deserve this?" Everything he'd been through. As if losing his sister when he was 19 gave him a free pass to drain my savings for the rest of his life. But I was weak then. I was still the mother who would do anything for her son. So I wrote the check. $20,000 that I'd been saving for my retirement, for the medical bills I knew were coming as I got older, for the security I'd never had. The wedding was beautiful. Vivian looked like a princess. Daniel looked happy. I wore a dress I'd bought on sale and sat in the front row trying not to think about my empty bank account. During the reception, Vivian's mother, a woman named Patricia with too much Botox and too little warmth, cornered me at the bar. "You must be so proud," she said, sipping champagne. "Vivian is such a catch. Your son is lucky to have found someone from such a good family." Such a good family. As if mine wasn't good enough. As if the blood and sweat and tears I'd poured into raising Daniel alone after his father died meant nothing compared to their money and their country club memberships. I smiled and excused myself. I went to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes, then fixed my makeup and went back out to watch my son dance with his new wife. And I told myself it would be okay. I told myself that now that they were married, things would settle down. We'd find a new normal. But it only got worse. 3 months after the wedding, Daniel called to ask if they could move in with me temporarily. Vivian had quit her job to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities, and their rent had gone up. Just for a few months, he promised. Just until they got back on their feet. I said yes. What else could I say? He was my son. They moved in with 7 suitcases, 3 boxes of Vivian's designer shoes, and a sense of entitlement that filled every room of my house. Within a week, Vivian had rearranged my living room, thrown out half my kitchen supplies because they weren't up to standard, and started leaving passive-aggressive notes about how I should do my own laundry separately because her clothes required special care. The few months turned into 6. Then 8. Then a year. They paid no rent. They contributed nothing to groceries. Daniel spent his evenings playing video games while Vivian spent her days shopping online with credit cards I didn't even know existed. And every time I tried to have a conversation about when they might move out, Daniel would get defensive. "We're family, Mom. Family helps each other. Or are you too selfish to understand that?" Selfish. That word. That poisonous, manipulative word that would come back to haunt me on Thanksgiving night. By the time the second year rolled around, I was suffocating in my own home. They'd taken over the master bedroom because Vivian said my bed was more comfortable. I'd moved into the smaller guest room, sleeping on a mattress that hurt my back and listening to them fight through the walls at night. They fought about money constantly, Daniel angry that Vivian's business ideas never materialized, Vivian angry that Daniel wasn't making enough to support her lifestyle. And somehow, it was always my fault. If I asked them to help with dishes, I was treating them like servants. If I suggested they start looking for their own place, I was being heartless. Vivian had this way of crying on command, of making every confrontation feel like I was attacking her personally, and Daniel always took her side. I started to feel like a stranger in my own house. I'd wake up early to use the bathroom before they monopolized it for 2 hours. I'd eat dinner alone in my room to avoid the tension at the table. I'd spend hours in my garden because it was the only place that still felt like mine. That's when I started to change. That's when the anger started building, slowly at first, then faster, hotter, until it consumed every waking thought. I'd lie in that uncomfortable bed at night and imagine telling them to leave, imagine packing their bags and throwing them out. But I couldn't. Because Daniel was my son. Because I'd already lost one child and I couldn't bear to lose another. So I swallowed my rage and I waited. I waited and I watched and I started to see things clearly for the first time in my life. I saw how Vivian manipulated Daniel, how she used tears and sex and guilt to get whatever she wanted. I saw how Daniel had become a weak, entitled man who blamed everyone else for his problems. I saw how they both viewed me not as a mother or a person, but as a resource to be exploited. And I realized something that changed everything. They would never leave on their own. They would stay in my house until I died, and then they'd sell it and spend my money and forget I ever existed. Unless I made them leave. Unless I forced their hand. That's when I started planning. Not revenge, not yet, just survival. I opened a new bank account they didn't know about. I started transferring money there slowly, carefully, creating a cushion they couldn't touch. I contacted a lawyer to make sure my will was updated, making sure certain assets were protected. I installed cameras in the common areas of my house, hidden ones, just in case I needed evidence of something someday. I became two people. The doormat Eleanor they saw every day, the one who cooked and cleaned and kept her mouth shut. And the real Eleanor, the one they'd underestimated, the one who was preparing for war. Then came September, 3 months before Thanksgiving. That's when Vivian's parents lost their house in Arizona. Something about bad investments and unpaid taxes. I never got the full story. But suddenly, Daniel came to me with tears in his eyes and a request that made my blood run cold. "Mom," he said. "Vivian's parents have nowhere to go. They need our help. They need to move in here, just temporarily, just until they figure things out." I stared at him. At my son, my beautiful boy who I'd raised to be kind and strong, who'd somehow turned into this weak, manipulated man standing in my kitchen asking me to give away what little space I had left. "No," I said. Simple as that. The first time I'd said no to him in 2 years. His face changed. Hardened. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Daniel. This is my house. There's no room for 4 more people. I can't do it." That's when Vivian appeared in the doorway like she'd been listening the whole time. Probably had been. "What's going on?" Daniel turned to her. "She's saying no. She won't let your parents stay here." Vivian's eyes narrowed. She looked at me with such pure hatred that I actually took a step back. "Wow," she said softly. "I knew you were cold, Eleanor, but I didn't know you were cruel." "It's not cruel to have boundaries," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry about your parents, I really am, but this house isn't big enough." "You have 3 empty bedrooms." Vivian shouted. 3. "You're rattling around in this house all by yourself while my parents are about to be homeless, and you can't find it in your heart to help them." "They're not going to be homeless," I said. "They have options. They can rent an apartment, find a smaller place." "They can't afford it." Daniel yelled. "Don't you understand? They're broke. They need family right now, and you're turning your back on them." "They're not my family, Daniel. They're strangers to me." Wrong thing to say. I knew it the moment the words left my mouth. Vivian's face went white, then red. Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. "Strangers." Vivian's voice shook. "I'm your daughter-in-law. My parents are your family now. But I guess that doesn't matter to you, does it? Because you've never really accepted me. You've never really wanted me here." She was good. God, she was good. The way her eyes filled with tears, the way her voice broke at just the right moment. If I hadn't spent 2 years watching her perform, I might have fallen for it. "Vivian," I said carefully, "this isn't about you. This is about space and boundaries, Anne. It's about you being selfish." Daniel shouted. "It's always been about you. Your house, your space, your needs. What about what we need? What about family?" There was that word again. Selfish. And I felt something inside me snap. Not break, snap. Like a rubber band stretched too far, suddenly recoiling with all its stored energy. I smiled. It was a small smile, cold and calculated, and I saw them both react to it. They weren't used to seeing me smile like that. "Okay," I said quietly. "We'll talk about this more later. I need some time to think." They exchanged glances, clearly surprised I'd backed down so easily. Vivian wiped her fake tears. Daniel's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "I knew you'd come around." I nodded and walked out of the kitchen. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the wall. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Because I'd just realized something important. They weren't going to stop. This was never going to end. They'd bring Vivian's parents in, and then maybe her sister, and then Daniel's friends who needed a place to crash. They'd fill every inch of my house with their entitlement and their demands until there was nothing left of me at all. unless I stopped them first. That night, I called my lawyer. His name was Robert Chen. Wait, no, not Chen. His name was Robert Morrison, an old family friend who'd handled my second divorce. I told him I needed to see him urgently, that I needed advice about protecting my assets. He agreed to meet me the next morning. In his office, I laid out everything. The money they'd taken, the way they'd moved in and refused to leave, Vivian's parents' impending arrival, all of it. Robert listened carefully, taking notes, his expression growing darker as I spoke. Eleanor, he said when I finished, I'm going to be honest with you. If they've been living in your house for 2 years, they may have established tenancy rights. You can't just kick them out. You'd need to go through a formal eviction process. How long would that take? Months. Maybe longer if they fight it. And it would destroy your relationship with your son. I laughed. It came out bitter and sharp. What relationship? He already sees me as nothing but a wallet and a free hotel. At least this way I'd have my house back. Robert leaned back in his chair. There might be another way. A faster way. But it would require some strategic planning. I leaned forward. I'm listening. And that's when he told me about Phase 1. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity, and that's what made it dangerous. Robert explained it to me over coffee in his office, his voice low and careful, like he was worried someone might overhear us plotting what was essentially a manipulation of the legal system. Here's what you need to understand, he said, sliding a legal pad across the desk toward me. If you want them out quickly, you need leverage. Not just a desire for them to leave, but documented evidence of behavior that makes it impossible for you to safely coexist with them in your own home. I stared at the blank pad. What kind of behavior? Threatening behavior. Aggressive behavior. The kind that would make any reasonable person fear for their safety. He paused, watching my face carefully. I'm not suggesting you fabricate anything, Eleanor. But if such behavior were to occur, and if you were to document it properly, it would expedite the legal process significantly. My mouth went dry. You're saying I should provoke them? I'm saying that people show their true colors when they're pushed. And if they were to push back in a way that crossed legal lines, assault, for instance, or destruction of property, then you'd have grounds for an emergency restraining order, which would require them to vacate your home immediately, not in months. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. The ethical implications were staggering. But so was the thought of spending another year, another 5 years, trapped in my own home with people who saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. How would I even? I started, but Robert held up a hand. That's not something I can advise you on, he said carefully. I can only tell you what the legal process would look like if certain situations were to arise. The rest is up to you. We sat in silence for a moment. Through his office window, I could see the town square below, people going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the calculation happening 4 floors up. I need you to document everything from this point forward, Robert continued, pulling out a folder. Keep a journal. Write down dates, times, conversations. What was said, who said it, the context. If there are witnesses, note that. If you have recordings or photos, save them. Build a timeline. I already have cameras in the house, I said. Hidden ones. Robert's eyebrows rose. That's good. Depending on your state's recording laws, that could be very useful. Just make sure you're not violating any privacy expectations in bedrooms or bathrooms. They're only in common areas. Kitchen, living room, hallways. He nodded slowly. Then yes. That could be very useful indeed. I left his office that morning with a plan forming in my mind. It was risky, potentially cruel, and definitely manipulative. But I'd spent 2 years being manipulated by experts. Maybe it was time to beat them at their own game. The first thing I did was escalate my documentation. I started a journal, writing down everything. Every time Vivian made a snide comment about my cooking. Every time Daniel ignored my requests to help around the house. Every time they had loud arguments at 2 in the morning that kept me awake. Every penny they spent on my credit cards. Yes, they'd somehow gotten access to one of my cards, though I still don't know how. I documented it all. The cameras were already installed, but I added more. One in the garage because that's where they stored their expensive things and I wanted to show the disparity between what they owned and what they claimed to afford. One near the front door to capture comings and goings. I made sure everything was timestamped and backed up to a cloud service they didn't know about. Then came the hard part, setting the trap. I had to make them show their true nature on camera. I had to push them to a point where they'd react with aggression, with violence, with something undeniable that would hold up in court. But I couldn't be too obvious about it. They had to believe they were the ones in control, that they were reacting to my unreasonableness, not falling into a carefully constructed scenario. The opportunity came in late October. Vivian's parents, Paul and Patricia Hartley, were scheduled to arrive in early November. Vivian had already started clearing out my sewing room, throwing my fabric and supplies into boxes without asking, preparing the space for her parents. I let her do it. I watched her pack away my things, my hobbies, my small joys, and I said nothing. I just documented it. Photos of my organized sewing room before. Photos of it ransacked and repurposed. Timestamps showing she did this while I was out at the grocery store, without my permission. But I needed more than petty violations. I needed something explosive. That's when I came up with the Thanksgiving idea. Thanksgiving has always been important to me. It was my late husband's favorite holiday. After he died, I'd continued the tradition alone, cooking a full meal every year even if it was just me eating it. Daniel knew this. He'd grown up with these Thanksgivings, had memories of his father carving the turkey, his little sister making terrible mashed potatoes that we all pretended were delicious. This year, I decided, would be different. This year, Thanksgiving would be the stage for Phase 1. I started planning in early November. The Hartleys, Vivian's parents, had already arrived by then, and just as I predicted, they'd moved into my sewing room without so much as asking permission. They were exactly as I'd imagined, entitled, dismissive, treating my home like a hotel where the service was terrible and the amenities subpar. Paul was a tall man with a gut and a receding hairline, constantly on his phone with business opportunities that never materialized. Patricia was a carbon copy of Vivian, just 20 years older and with more obvious plastic surgery. They complained about everything. The water pressure. The thread count of the sheets I'd provided. The fact that I didn't have a dedicated wine fridge. Living with 2 of them had been unbearable. Living with 4 of them was hell. But I smiled. I nodded. I played the role of the gracious hostess even as they slowly consumed everything I had. And all the while, I was documenting. Building my case. Waiting for the perfect moment. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I made my first move. I announced at dinner that I would be hosting Thanksgiving as usual, but that there would be some changes this year. Changes? Vivian asked, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Yes, I said pleasantly. I've decided that since my sewing room has been converted into your parents' bedroom, I'll need to use the guest room upstairs for storing Thanksgiving supplies. Which means I'll need to move back into the master bedroom. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel and Vivian exchanged glances. Patricia's lips pursed. The master bedroom. Vivian said slowly, but that's our room. It was my room first, I said, keeping my voice calm. I'm sorry, but I need the space. You and Daniel can move into the guest room I've been using. It's only fair. Fair. Daniel's voice rose. You want us to downgrade to a smaller room so you can have more storage space. I want to sleep in my own bed again, Daniel. In my own house. The house I paid for. The house I've let you all live in rent-free for 2 years. I watched Vivian's face turn red. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is ridiculous, she finally spat. You're being petty and vindictive, Anne. I'm being practical, I interrupted. And it's my house. My decision. Paul leaned back in his chair, smirking. Sounds like someone's finally showing their true colors. I turned to him. I'm sorry, Paul, did you have something to add? Because I don't remember asking your opinion about how I manage my own home. His smirk vanished. Patricia gasped. Daniel stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Don't talk to her father that way. Vivian shrieked. Then he shouldn't disrespect me in my own home, I said, and I was pleased to hear how steady my voice was. How calm. Because inside, my heart was racing. This was it. The beginning of the end. That night, I heard them through the walls. All 4 of them, gathered in the master bedroom, talking about me. The cameras didn't reach into the bedroom, that would have been illegal, but I didn't need them to. Their raised voices told me everything. She's losing it, Vivian hissed. She's always been difficult, Patricia added. Maybe we should start looking for our own place, Daniel said, and my heart leaped for a moment before Vivian shut him down. With what money? We can't afford to move out, Daniel. Not until your next promotion, and that's months away. We're stuck here. Then we need to make her back down, Paul said. She's testing us. Seeing what she can get away with. We need to stand firm. They decided to refuse. They wouldn't move rooms. They'd call my bluff. But I wasn't bluffing. The next morning, while they were all out, I hired movers. Professional, efficient movers who relocated everything from the master bedroom into the smaller guest room in under 3 hours. Then I moved my own belongings back where they belonged. My clothes in the closet. My photos on the dresser. My grandmother's quilt on the bed. When they came home that evening and saw what I'd done, Vivian actually screamed. A full-throated, dramatic scream that probably scared the neighbors. She ran through the house like a madwoman, throwing open doors, seeing her things crammed into the smaller space, her designer clothes shoved into a tiny closet. You can't do this, she shrieked, storming into the kitchen where I was calmly making tea. You can't just move our things without permission. It's my house, I said again. I can do whatever I want. Daniel appeared behind her, his face purple with rage. This is insane, Mom. You're acting insane. First you refused to help Vivian's parents, now you're kicking us out of our room. I didn't kick you out of your room. You're still living here rent-free. I simply reclaimed my own space. Your space. Vivian laughed, high and hysterical. Your space? We've been living here for 2 years. This is our home too. No, I said quietly. It's my home. You're just guests who've overstayed their welcome. The look on her face in that moment, pure, unadulterated hatred, was almost worth everything that came after. They didn't speak to me for 3 days. Which was fine. I used the silence to finalize my Thanksgiving plans. I ordered the turkey, planned the menu, bought all the ingredients. I also reached out to a few people I hadn't spoken to in a while. My sister-in-law Janet, who lived 2 hours away, my old friend Constance from church, and my neighbor Dorothy, who'd watched Daniel grow up. I invited them all to Thanksgiving dinner. 6 people total, including me and the 4 parasites currently occupying my home. It would be crowded. It would be tense. It would be perfect. Because here's what I'd figured out, Vivian and Daniel behaved one way when it was just us. But when they had an audience, when they felt they needed to maintain appearances, they became even more volatile. They couldn't stand being called out in front of others. They couldn't handle public disagreement. And I was going to use that. The week of Thanksgiving, I could feel the tension building. Vivian had stopped even pretending to be civil. She'd leave dishes in the sink for me to clean, blast music in the middle of the day, monopolize the bathroom for hours. Patricia joined in, making passive-aggressive comments about how some people didn't know how to make guests feel welcome. I documented all of it. Every slight, every comment, every deliberate act of disrespect. My journal filled with pages of their behavior, time-stamped and detailed. The cameras caught Patricia throwing away my leftovers to make room for her expensive cheese, Vivian rearranging my kitchen cabinets without asking, Paul helping himself to my good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving from my first husband's collection. And through it all, I smiled. I was pleasant. I played the part of the patient, long-suffering mother and host. Because I knew what was coming. I knew that at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of witnesses, I was going to push them past their breaking point. Robert and I had refined the plan over several meetings. The key was to have witnesses, people who could testify that I'd been reasonable, that I'd been attacked, that I'd done nothing to provoke the violence that was coming. Janet, Constance, and Dorothy were perfect. They knew me, they'd seen how Daniel had changed over the years, and they could be trusted to tell the truth about what they witnessed. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I told Daniel and Vivian about the other guests. I forgot to mention, I said casually over breakfast. I've invited a few people to join us for Thanksgiving. My sister-in-law Janet, my friend Constance, and Dorothy from next door. Vivian's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. You invited other people? Without asking us? I didn't realize I needed to ask permission to invite guests to my own home, I said sweetly. But there's not enough room. Patricia protested. We barely fit as it is. We'll make it work, I said. It'll be cozy. Cozy wasn't the word for it. It was going to be cramped and uncomfortable and deliberately claustrophobic. Which was exactly what I needed. Pressure creates diamonds, my mother used to say. But it also makes explosives. The night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my reclaimed bed, in my room, in my house, and ran through the plan one more time. Tomorrow, during dinner, I would bring up the subject of Vivian's parents moving out. I would do it calmly, reasonably, in front of witnesses. And when they inevitably exploded, when Vivian showed her true colors, when the violence I'd been enduring emotionally finally manifested physically, I would have everything I needed. Robert had prepared the paperwork. The police would be called. The emergency restraining order would be filed that night. By Friday morning, they'd all be out of my house. Or at least, that was the plan. What I didn't anticipate was just how far Vivian would go. How much rage she'd been storing up, waiting for the right moment to unleash it. I thought I knew what I was dealing with. I thought I'd seen the worst of her. I had no idea. I woke up at 5 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, not because of an alarm, but because my body knew what was coming. My heart was already racing before I even opened my eyes. I lay there in the pre-dawn darkness, listening to the old house settle around me, and wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But then I heard it, Vivian's voice from down the hall, sharp and complaining about something. Probably the fact that the shower wasn't hot enough or the towels weren't fluffy enough. And just like that, my doubt evaporated. I wasn't making a mistake. I was making a necessary move in a game I hadn't wanted to play but couldn't afford to lose. I got out of bed and pulled on my robe, the thick terracloth one I'd bought myself for Christmas 5 years ago. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked older than 63. The stress of the past 2 years had carved lines around my mouth and eyes, had turned more of my hair grey. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. Today was the day everything changed. The turkey was already thawing in the refrigerator, a 22-pound bird-eyed special ordered from the butcher downtown. I'd been preparing for this meal all week, making the cranberry sauce from scratch, baking the pies, preparing the green bean casserole mixture that just needed to be heated. Everything was ready. Everything was planned down to the minute. I went downstairs and started the coffee, the familiar ritual soothing my nerves. The kitchen was my sanctuary, the one room in the house where I still felt completely in control. I'd reclaimed my bedroom, yes, but the kitchen had never been taken from me. Probably because none of them wanted to do the actual work of cooking. As the coffee brewed, I pulled out my journal and made a final entry. Thanksgiving Day. 5:17 a.m. About to begin food preparation. Janet, Constance, and Dorothy arriving at 2 p.m. dinner planned for 3 p.m. Daniel and Vivian still angry about room situation. Patricia made comment yesterday about how real families don't treat each other this way. Paul drank rest of James's whiskey last night. Note, James was my first husband. That whiskey was 30 years old. Irreplaceable. Paul knew this. He drank it anyway while watching football, then left the empty bottle on the counter. Asterisk. Asterisk phase 1 proceeds as planned. Robert has his phone on. Police non-emergency number is programmed into my phone. Cameras are all functioning and backed up to cloud. Asterisk. Asterisk if anyone ever reads this, I want you to know I didn't want it to come to this. I wanted my son back. I wanted a daughter-in-law I could love, a family I could be part of. But they took everything from me piece by piece, and when I had nothing left to give, they demanded more. Today, I take it all back. Asterisk. I closed the journal and tucked it into the drawer where I kept my important papers. Then I poured myself coffee and got to work. By 7 a.m., the turkey was in the oven, filling the house with that unmistakable Thanksgiving smell. I was peeling potatoes when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy ones. Paul. He shuffled into the kitchen in his bathrobe, looking rumpled and hungover. His eyes were bloodshot, and he didn't acknowledge me at all as he poured himself coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his phone. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. He grunted. I continued peeling potatoes, the rhythmic scrape of the peeler the only sound besides his heavy breathing. After a few minutes, he spoke without looking up from his phone. "Vivian told me what you're planning." My hands stilled. "Oh? What am I planning?" "You're going to try to kick us out. Today, during dinner, in front of your friends. You think embarrassing us publicly will force us to leave." I set down the peeler carefully and turned to face him. "I'm not planning to kick anyone out, Paul. I'm planning to have a conversation about everyone's living arrangements. Like adults. He finally looked at me, and the contempt in his eyes was staggering. You're a bitter old woman. You know that? Bitter and alone and jealous that your son found happiness with someone who actually matters. Someone who actually matters. As if I didn't. As if the woman who'd given birth to Daniel, raised him alone, sacrificed everything for him, didn't matter at all. Get out of my kitchen, I said quietly. What? I said get out. I have work to do, and I don't want you here. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't even handle a simple conversation without getting emotional and throwing people out. Paul. My voice was ice. You drank my late husband's whiskey last night. A 30-year-old bottle that I was saving, that had sentimental value beyond anything you could understand. You drank it like it was cheap beer while watching a football game, and you left the empty bottle on my counter like trash. You're living in my house rent-free, sleeping in the room where I used to pursue my hobbies, contributing nothing, and you have the audacity to sit in my kitchen and insult me. So yes, I'm emotional. And yes, I want you out of this room right now. His face turned red. For a moment, I thought he might actually get physical. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw worked. But then Patricia's voice came from upstairs, calling his name, and he stood up abruptly. You're going to regret this, he said. You're going to die alone in this house with no one who cares about you. He left. I heard him stomping up the stairs, heard the muffled conversation with Patricia in their room. Then I heard another door open, the smaller guest room where Daniel and Vivian now slept, and more voices joining in. They were all talking about me, planning their own strategy. Probably. Let them plan. My plan was already in motion. I went back to the potatoes, but my hands were shaking now. Paul's words had hit harder than I wanted to admit. You're going to die alone. Maybe I would. Maybe this whole thing would blow up in my face, and I'd lose my son forever, and I'd spend my final years exactly as Paul predicted, alone in this big house with nothing but memories and regrets. But at least it would be my house. At least I'd have my dignity back. By 9 a.m., the kitchen was in full Thanksgiving production mode. I had pots boiling, dishes baking, timers going off in a carefully orchestrated symphony. This was what I was good at. This was where I found peace, in the act of creation, of taking raw ingredients and transforming them into something that brought joy. Vivian came down around 9:30, already dressed and made up like she was going to a fashion show rather than a family dinner. She leaned against the doorframe and watched me work, her expression unreadable. Smells good, she said finally. Thank you. Must be nice, having something you're actually good at. There it was. The constant need to cut me down, to remind me that in her eyes, I was nothing but a cook and a maid and a wallet. Vivian, I said, not looking up from the sweet potatoes I was cubing. We're going to have a lot of people here today. I would appreciate it if you could be civil. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Civil? You want to talk about being civil? After what you've done? After what I've done? I set down the knife and turned to face her. I've given you a home for 2 years. I've fed you, housed you, paid for your lifestyle while you've contributed nothing. What exactly have I done that's so terrible? You've made us feel unwelcome in our own home. Her voice was rising now. You've treated my parents like garbage. You've made it clear that we're a burden to you. You are a burden, Vivian. You and Daniel have been living off me like parasites for 2 years. Your parents moved in without permission and have been treating my home like a hotel where I'm the incompetent staff. At what point was I supposed to keep pretending this was normal? At what point was I allowed to say enough? Her face was flushed now, her carefully applied makeup cracking around the edges. We're family. You're supposed to support family no matter what. And what about my needs? What about my life? Or do those not matter because I'm just the old woman who's supposed to give and give and give until there's nothing left? You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Finally. We stared at each other across the kitchen, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. Then Daniel appeared behind her, and I saw the alliance in their eyes. Whatever else they fought about, they were united against me. Is everything okay? Daniel asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew it wasn't. Your mother is having a breakdown, Vivian said sweetly. I think the stress of today is getting to her. I'm fine, I said firmly. I'm just making it clear that today's dinner will include a conversation about everyone's living arrangements. That's all. Today. Daniel's voice rose. You want to have that conversation today, on Thanksgiving, in front of guests? Yes. I think it's time we all had an honest discussion about the situation. With witnesses present. Witnesses. Vivian's eyes narrowed. What are you planning, Eleanor? I'm planning to serve a nice meal and have a difficult but necessary conversation. Nothing more. That was a lie, of course. I was planning so much more. But they didn't need to know that yet. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd had since childhood that meant he was stressed. Mom, please. Can't we just have one nice day? One day without all this tension. And there it was, the part of him that was still my son, still the boy I'd raised, breaking through the entitled man he'd become. For just a moment, I felt my resolve waver. But then Vivian put her hand on his arm, possessive and controlling, and said, "She won't drop it, Daniel. She's determined to ruin the day. That's what she does, she ruins things." The moment of weakness passed. I turned back to my sweet potatoes. "Please leave my kitchen," I said. "Both of you. I have work to do." They left, but I could feel their anger lingering in the air like smoke. I heard them gather in the living room with Paul and Patricia, heard the low rumble of their voices plotting, planning, preparing for whatever they thought was coming. If you've ever been in a situation where you knew everything was about to explode but you had to just keep moving forward anyway, you understand what the next few hours felt like. I cooked in a state of heightened awareness, every nerve ending alert, every sound amplified. The knife slicing through vegetables sounded too loud. The timer beeping made me jump. But I kept working because that's what I'd always done. I endured. By 1 p.m., most of the food was ready. The turkey was resting, the sides were warming in various ovens and slow cookers, the table was set with my good china, the set I'd inherited from my grandmother and had protected through 2 divorces and countless moves. I'd set up additional seating in the dining room, cramming in extra chairs so we'd all fit. Barely. The cameras were all functioning. I checked them that morning on my phone, reviewing the angles, making sure everything would be captured. The one in the dining room had a clear view of the entire table. The one in the kitchen would catch anyone who left the room. Perfect. At 1:45, I went upstairs to change. I'd picked out my outfit carefully, a simple navy dress, not too fancy but respectable. Comfortable shoes in case I needed to move quickly. I put on my mother's pearls, the ones she'd worn to every important occasion. They felt heavy around my neck, like armor. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I was, a 63-year-old woman about to go to war with her own family. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick. My eyes were clear. I looked at myself and thought, this is it. After today, nothing will ever be the same. I heard a car pull up outside. Through my bedroom window, I saw Janet getting out, carrying a covered dish. My sister-in-law, my first husband's sister, who'd stood by me through everything. She was 70 now, her hair completely white, but her spine was still straight and her mind sharp as ever. I went downstairs to greet her, and the moment she hugged me, I almost broke. She held me for a long moment, then pulled back and looked at me with knowing eyes. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" she whispered. "I'm sure. It's going to be ugly." "I know." She squeezed my hand. "Then I'm here. Whatever you need." Constance arrived next, my friend from church who'd known me for 20 years. She was a tiny woman with a fierce spirit and a sharp tongue when needed. Then Dorothy from next door, who brought her famous cornbread stuffing and gave me a look that said she knew something was up. I introduced them all to Vivian's parents, watched the stilted small talk, the forced pleasantries. Paul was on his best behavior, charming and jovial. Patricia was all smiles and compliments. Vivian and Daniel were playing the role of the perfect couple, attentive and gracious. But I could see the tension in their shoulders. The tightness around Vivian's smile. The way Daniel kept glancing at the clock like he couldn't wait for this to be over. By 2:45, we were all gathered in the dining room. I'd arranged the seating carefully, Janet and Constance on either side of me for support. Daniel and Vivian directly across from me where I could see their faces clearly. Paul and Patricia at one end, Dorothy at the other. The table was beautiful, I had to admit. The good china gleamed under the chandelier. The turkey sat in the center, perfectly golden and carved. Steam rose from dishes of mashed potatoes, stuffing, green beans, cranberry sauce. It looked like a magazine spread, like the perfect American Thanksgiving. But perfection, I'd learned, was usually just a pretty mask over something rotten. I stood to say grace, a tradition from my first husband's family that I'd maintained all these years. Everyone bowed their heads. Everyone except Vivian, I noticed. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Dear Lord, I began, my voice steady. We thank you for this food, for this home, and for the people gathered here today. We are grateful for family, for health, for the blessings we've received. We ask that you guide us through difficult conversations with grace and honesty. Help us to speak our truths with courage and to hear others' truths with compassion. And Lord, protect those who cannot protect themselves. Amen. Amen, everyone echoed. Except Vivian. We began to eat, and for the first 20 minutes, it was almost pleasant. People complimented the food. There was laughter, conversation about safe topics, the weather, holiday shopping, Dorothy's new grandchild. I could almost forget what was coming. But then Janet asked the question I'd been waiting for. So Daniel, she said casually, passing the potatoes. Your mother mentioned you've been living here for a while now. How's the house hunt going? The table went silent. Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Vivian's eyes snapped to me, blazing with fury because she absolutely knew, that I'd set this up. We're not house hunting, Daniel said carefully. We're saving money. The market isn't great right now. Oh. Constance joined in, right on cue. I heard there are some lovely places opening up over on Elm Street. Very affordable. We're happy here, Vivian said through gritted teeth. Eleanor has been very generous letting us stay. 2 years is quite generous, Dorothy added innocently. Most house guests don't stay quite that long. I watched the color rise in Vivian's cheeks. Watched Daniel's jaw clench. This was it. This was the moment. Actually, I said quietly, and every eye turned to me. I've been meaning to talk to all of you about this. I think it's time we discussed what comes next. Not now, Mom, Daniel said quickly. Not during dinner. When then, Daniel? We've been avoiding this conversation for 2 years. I think our guests deserve to understand the full situation. There's no situation, Vivian snapped. We're living here temporarily until... Until what? I interrupted. Until I die? Until there's nothing left of me or my resources. I need to know, Vivian. What's the endgame here? Patricia spoke up, her voice syrupy with false concern. Eleanor, honey, you sound paranoid. We're all just trying to help each other through tough times. Help. I looked at her directly. Paul drank my late husband's 30-year-old whiskey last night. A bottle with tremendous sentimental value. He drank it like it was nothing and left the empty bottle on my counter. Does that sound like helping? Paul's face went red. It was just a drink. Don't be so precious about everything. It wasn't just a drink. It was one of the last things I had from James. And you consumed it without a second thought because you've never respected me or my home or my belongings. Oh, here we go, Vivian muttered. Everything's always about her. Janet leaned forward. Vivian, show some respect. This is Eleanor's home. And she never lets us forget it. Vivian burst out. Everything is my house, my rules, my things. God forbid anyone else has any say or any comfort. You want comfort? My voice was rising now too. You've had 2 years of comfort. 2 years of free rent, free food, a free life while I've slowly been squeezed into smaller and smaller spaces in my own home. Nobody forced you to let us stay. Daniel shouted. You offered. Because you guilt me into it. Because you made me feel like a bad mother if I said no. Because you knew I couldn't bear to lose you after I'd already lost your sister. The mention of his sister, my daughter, my baby who died at 21 in a car accident, hung in the air like a bomb. Daniel's face went white. Don't, he said quietly. Don't you dare use Amy against me. I'm not using her against you. I'm explaining why I've let this go on so long. Why I've tolerated things no person should have to tolerate in their own home. Because losing her broke something in me, and I was terrified of losing you too. So I said yes when I should have said no. I gave when I had nothing left to give. I erased myself piece by piece until I barely existed in my own life. Tears were streaming down my face now, but they were real. This wasn't part of the act. This was the truth pouring out after 2 years of silence. But I can't do it anymore, I continued. I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't even see me as human. I need my life back. I need my house back. I need all of you to leave. The silence was deafening. Then everyone started talking at once. Patricia calling me selfish. Paul telling me I was heartless. Constance and Janet defending me. Dorothy trying to calm everyone down. And Vivian. Oh, Vivian. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. Her face was twisted with rage, with years of resentment finally finding an outlet. You want us to leave, she screamed. Fine. We'll leave. But you'll die alone, you bitter old bitch. You'll die alone in this house and no one will care. Vivian. Daniel grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. No. She needs to hear this. She's a selfish, manipulative, controlling woman who can't stand seeing anyone else happy. She's jealous because she's alone and her life is empty and she wants to drag everyone down with her. I stood up slowly, calmly. I'm selfish. My voice was quiet now, dangerous. I'm selfish for wanting boundaries, for wanting respect, for wanting my own home back. You have 3 empty bedrooms. Vivian screamed, and there it was, the line I'd been waiting for. You have all this space and you won't share it. My parents have nowhere to go and you won't help them. They're not my responsibility, Vivian. They're family. They're strangers who moved into my house without permission. Without permission. Patricia stood now too. You said we could stay. I said you could stay temporarily, and that was before I understood what temporarily meant to you people. You people. Paul was on his feet now. Listen to yourself. You sound insane. Get out, I said. All of you. Get out of my house. We're not going anywhere. Vivian shrieked. This is our home too. We have rights. You have no rights. This is my house. My name on the deed. My mortgage that's been paid off for 10 years. Your guests who've overstayed your welcome, and I want you out. You can't throw us out on Thanksgiving. Daniel finally found his voice. Mom, please, let's just calm down, Anne. I don't want to calm down. I want my life back. And that's when Vivian picked up her wine glass. Time slowed down in that moment, the way it does before a car accident or any other disaster you can see coming but can't stop. I watched Vivian's hand close around the stem of the wine glass, one of my grandmother's crystal glasses, irreplaceable and beautiful. I watched her arm draw back. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the split-second decision between controlling herself and giving in to the rage that had been building for months. And I did nothing to stop her. Janet gasped. Constance reached out like she might intervene. Dorothy half stood from her chair. But it was too late. Vivian's arm swung forward with all the force of 2 years of resentment behind it, and the wine glass flew across the table directly at my face. I could have ducked. Should have ducked. But some part of me, the part that had planned this whole thing, the part that needed evidence, needed witnesses, needed undeniable proof, that part of me stood still and let it happen. The glass hit me just below my left eye. I felt the impact first, a sharp crack against my cheekbone. Then came the explosion of pain as the crystal shattered, sending shards into my skin. Something hot and wet ran down my face, wine or blood, I couldn't tell. The glass had been half full of red wine, and now it was everywhere, on my face, my dress, my grandmother's pearls. I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively going to my face. When I pulled it away, my palm was covered in blood. Quite a lot of blood, actually. Head wounds bleed profusely, I knew that intellectually, but seeing my own blood was still shocking. The dining room erupted into chaos. Oh my God. Dorothy screamed. Eleanor. Janet was up and moving toward me. I didn't, she made me, I didn't mean, Vivian's voice, high and panicky, already trying to justify what she'd done. But I focused on Daniel. My son. My boy. The child I'd raised to be kind and just and good. I looked at him through my left eye, the right one was already swelling shut, and waited to see what he would do. Would he check on me? Would he condemn his wife's violence? Would he show any sign that he still loved me, still saw me as his mother? He stood there, frozen, his face pale. And then he said the words that would haunt both of us forever. You're being selfish. Not are you okay? Not Vivian, what have you done? Just, you're being selfish. The pain of those words hurt worse than the glass. I touched my face again, felt the warm blood still flowing. The cut was deep, I could tell. Would probably need stitches. Good. Perfect. Even. This was more than I'd hoped for. Vivian was still talking, her voice rising higher with each word. You pushed me to this. You brought up my parents on Thanksgiving, in front of everyone, trying to humiliate us. You have empty bedrooms. You have space. But you're too selfish to share it. This is your fault. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw exactly what she was. A spoiled, entitled woman who'd never been told no in her life, who saw other people as nothing but resources to be exploited. She was still beautiful, even in her rage, but it was a hollow beauty. Nothing beneath the surface but greed and cruelty. And my son had chosen her. Had chosen this woman over me. Had just called me selfish while I was bleeding from a glass his wife had thrown at my face. Something inside me died in that moment. The last little piece of hope that Daniel might still come back to me, might still be the son I'd raised. It withered and disappeared, and in its place grew something cold and hard and absolutely determined. I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just a small curve of my lips that probably looked grotesque with blood running down my face. But I smiled because I knew, that I had one. Constance, I said calmly, my voice barely shaking. Could you get me a clean towel from the kitchen? Janet, my phone is on the counter. Would you bring it to me, please? They moved immediately, grateful for something useful to do. The rest of the table sat frozen, watching me like I was a bomb that might explode. Eleanor, Dorothy said carefully, you need to go to the hospital. That's a bad cut. I know, I said. I'm going. But first, I need to make a few calls. Janet returned with my phone. I took it with my clean hand, the one not covered in blood, and looked at Daniel one more time. Gave him one last chance. Anything you want to say to me? I asked quietly. He opened his mouth. Closed it. His eyes flicked to Vivian, then back to me. And I saw it happen. Saw him choose her again. Saw him prioritize keeping his wife happy over checking on his injured mother. You pushed her too far, he said finally. This is what happens when you push people too far. There it was. Victim blaming. Justification for violence. My son, telling me I deserved to be assaulted in my own home. Okay, I said softly. Okay. I turned away from him and looked at my friends instead. I need you all to stay. I need you to be witnesses to what happened here. Witnesses. Vivian's voice went shrill. It was an accident. I didn't mean to, the glass just slipped. Don't, I cut her off. Don't lie. Not now. There are 6 people at this table, and we all saw exactly what happened. You threw a glass at my face because I told you and your family to leave my house. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard what you said right before you did it. I pulled up my phone and noticed my hands were steady. Remarkably steady, considering. I opened my texts and found Robert Morrison's number. My lawyer. My co-conspirator in Phase 1. I typed carefully, aware that everyone was watching. Phase 1 is complete. Assault occurred in front of 3 witnesses. En route to ER. Will need police report. Proceeding to Phase 2. I hit send. Then I opened a new text to 911. Some people don't know you can text 911 now, but you can. And I wanted it in writing, timestamped and recorded. This is Eleanor Whitfield at 847 Maple Street. I've been assaulted by a family member in my home. Need police and ambulance. Multiple witnesses present. Injury to face, significant bleeding. I hit send on that one too. What are you doing? Daniel's voice was panicky now. Mom, what are you texting? I looked up at him. I'm calling the police, Daniel. Your wife just assaulted me. That's a crime. It was an accident. Vivian shrieked again. It wasn't an accident, Constance spoke up, her voice firm. I was sitting right here. I saw you pick up that glass deliberately and throw it at Eleanor's face. We all saw it. I'll testify to that, Janet added. So will I, Dorothy said quietly. Paul stood up, his face purple. You're all lying. She's manipulating you. Can't you see what she's doing? What I'm doing, I said calmly, pressing the towel Constance had brought me against my bleeding face, is pressing charges against someone who assaulted me in my own home. That's what any reasonable person would do. Reasonable? Vivian laughed, high and hysterical. You're not reasonable. You planned this. You wanted this to happen. Out of the mouths of manipulators sometimes comes the truth. But it didn't matter what she suspected. What mattered was what she'd done, and what everyone had seen her do. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. * police will be there in 10 minutes. Say nothing more until they arrive. Document everything. Photos of injury, wine-stained dress, broken glass. I'm filing emergency restraining order now. This ends tonight. *. I smiled again, wider this time despite the pain. Oh, Robert. Efficient as ever. Eleanor. Daniel was moving toward me now, his hands up like he was approaching a wild animal. Mom, please. Let's not involve the police. We can handle this as a family. Vivian didn't mean it, she was just upset. Stop, I said. Just stop. A family handles disagreements by talking. By respecting each other. By setting boundaries and honoring them. What you've been doing for 2 years isn't family. It's exploitation. And what Vivian just did isn't an accident. It's assault. And I'm done pretending otherwise. They're going to arrest her. Daniel's voice cracked. Is that what you want? Your daughter-in-law arrested on Thanksgiving. She's not my daughter-in-law, I said quietly. She's a woman who threw a glass at my face because I refused to let her parents live in my house rent-free for the rest of my life. And yes, Daniel. I want her arrested. I want all of you out of my house. Tonight. You can't kick us out. Patricia was on her feet now too. We have nowhere to go. You have options, I said. Hotels. Friends. Family. Arizona. Anywhere but here. This is insane. Paul shouted. You're destroying this family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I pulled the towel away from my face and held it up so they could see the blood soaking through it. Does this look like a misunderstanding to you? I heard sirens in the distance. Getting closer. Janet was taking photos of me with her phone. Smart woman, documenting everything. Constance was carefully collecting pieces of the broken crystal glass, placing them in a napkin. Evidence. Dorothy was writing notes on the back of a Thanksgiving place card. Times, statements, what she'd witnessed. My friends. My real family. Protecting me the way family should. Vivian started to cry. Real tears this time, I thought. Tears of fear and panic and realization that she'd gone too far. She looked at Daniel with those big, desperate eyes, the eyes that had probably gotten her everything she'd ever wanted in life. Daniel, she sobbed. Fix this. Please. Don't let them take me. And I watched my son's face as he struggled with the choice in front of him. His wife or his mother. The truth or the lie. The right thing or the easy thing. He chose the easy thing. Of course he did. Mom, he said, and his voice was pleading now. Drop this. Please. For me. For your son. Don't do this. You mean don't hold your wife accountable for assaulting me? Don't protect myself? Don't demand basic respect in my own home? I shook my head, and pain radiated through my skull. No, Daniel. I won't drop this. And if you continue to defend her, if you continue to choose her over doing what's right, then you're choosing to lose me. Forever. You're manipulating me, he shouted. You're trying to force me to choose. No, I said softly. You already chose. 2 years ago when you moved in here and started treating me like a bank account instead of your mother. Today when you called me selfish while I was bleeding. You chose, Daniel. You just don't like the consequences of your choice. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flashed through the dining room windows, painting grotesque shadows on the walls. The beautiful Thanksgiving table, the perfect holiday scene I'd created, was destroyed. Wine and blood on the white tablecloth. Broken glass glittering among the mashed potatoes. My grandmother's crystal shattered, just like my relationship with my son. But I'd survived worse. I'd survived losing my daughter. I'd survived 2 divorces and bankruptcy and more pain than most people experienced in a lifetime. I'd survive this too. The doorbell rang. Dorothy went to answer it, and moments later 2 police officers entered the dining room. A man and a woman, both young, both looking slightly overwhelmed by the scene in front of them. The female officer said, approaching me carefully. I'm Officer Rodriguez. We got a text about an assault. I nodded, then gestured to my face. My daughter-in-law threw a wine glass at me. It shattered when it hit. Multiple witnesses. I pointed to Janet, Constance, and Dorothy. Officer Rodriguez's expression hardened when she saw my injury. You're going to need medical attention for that. Did you text for an ambulance too? Yes. Good. It should be here any minute. She turned to her partner. Call it in. Get EMS here faster if you can. Then she looked at the table, at the faces frozen in various states of shock and guilt and anger. Which one of you is the daughter-in-law? Vivian raised a shaking hand. It was an accident, she whispered. I didn't mean to hurt her. I'm going to need you to step over here. Officer Rodriguez gestured away from the table. Don't touch anything. It was an accident. Vivian said again, louder. She was saying horrible things. She was trying to kick us out on Thanksgiving. She pushed me to. I need you to stop talking. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Vivian's face went white. Court? No, this is just a family dispute, we don't need. You assaulted someone. That's not a family dispute, that's a crime. Now, I'm going to need you to remain calm and step over here. I watched as the scene unfolded exactly as Robert and I had planned. The officers separating everyone, taking statements. More police arriving. An ambulance pulling up outside. Paramedics coming in with their kits and equipment, immediately surrounding me, asking questions, examining the wound. This is deep, one of them said, a young man with kind eyes. You're going to need stitches, probably staples. And we should get you checked for a concussion, that was quite an impact. I'm fine, I said. Just fix my face. He smiled slightly. We'll do our best, But we need to get you to the hospital. Are you able to walk? Yes. As they helped me up, I looked around the dining room one last time. At the ruins of Thanksgiving dinner. At my friends being interviewed by police. At Paul and Patricia huddled together, whispering frantically. At Daniel, standing alone in the corner, his face buried in his hands. And at Vivian, in handcuffs now, Officer Rodriguez reading her rights while she cried and protested and insisted it was all a mistake, all a misunderstanding, all my fault for pushing her too far. I pulled out my phone again and typed another text to Robert, my fingers working carefully around the blood and the pain. Asterisk, they're arresting her now. Heading to ER. The police came. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Asterisk. His response came immediately. Asterisk, perfect. Restraining order filed. By the time you're out of the hospital, you'll have legal grounds to remove all of them from your property. Phase 1 successful. Rest now. We'll move to Phase 2 tomorrow. Asterisk. I closed my eyes as the paramedics led me toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Vivian screaming my name, telling the officers I'd planned this, that I'd manipulated everything, that I wasn't a victim but a manipulator. She was right, of course. But the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what could be proven, what had been witnessed, what was now part of the official record. As we passed through the living room, I saw Daniel break away from the corner and rush toward me. An officer moved to intercept him, but I held up my hand. Let him talk, I said quietly. Daniel stopped in front of me, his face wet with tears. Mom, he choked out. Mom, please. Don't do this. Please. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Tried to find the boy I'd raised somewhere in this weak, manipulated man standing before me. But he was gone. Had been gone for years, probably. I'd just been too desperate to see it. I love you, Daniel, I said softly. I will always love you. But I can't save you from the consequences of your choices anymore. Vivian assaulted me. The police are arresting her. And I'm going to enforce every legal right I have to remove all of you from my home. That's not manipulation. That's survival. She didn't mean it, he whispered. She was just upset. Do you hear yourself? I asked. Your wife threw a glass at your mother's face, and you're defending her. Making excuses. Blaming me for making her upset. Do you understand how twisted that is? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I'm going to the hospital now, I continued. When I come back, I expect all of you to be packing. You have until tomorrow night to be gone. If you're still here after that, I'll have the police remove you. Do you understand? Mom. Do you understand, Daniel? He nodded slowly, defeat written across his face. Good. I turned to the paramedics. I'm ready to go now. They led me out into the cold November evening. The ambulance was parked in my driveway, its lights still flashing. Neighbors had come out onto their porches, drawn by the commotion. I saw Mrs. Chen, no, wait, Mrs. Patterson, from across the street, her hand over her mouth in shock. Old Mr. Walsh from next door, shaking his head sadly. They'd all watched Daniel grow up. They'd all seen what my life had become over the past 2 years. Now they were witnessing the end of it. The paramedics helped me into the ambulance. As they were closing the doors, I caught one last glimpse of my house. The lights were blazing in every window, making it look warm and inviting from the outside. But I knew what was really happening inside those walls, the fear, the anger, the desperate conversations about lawyers and bail and what to do next. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, no second thoughts. Just cold, calculated satisfaction that phase 1 had gone exactly according to plan. The ambulance pulled away, sirens silent but lights still flashing. I lay back on the gurney and closed my eyes, feeling the pain radiating through my face, tasting blood in my mouth. The paramedic, the kind-eyed young man, was asking me questions. My name, my date of birth, my medical history. I answered mechanically, part of my mind still back in that dining room, watching everything unfold. He said gently. Can you tell me exactly what happened? I opened my eyes and looked at him. My daughter-in-law threw a wine glass at my face because I asked her and her family to move out of my house. He nodded slowly, making notes. How long have they been living with you? 2 years. Rent-free. They've been difficult. I'd say so. He examined the cut carefully. This is going to need stitches for sure. Maybe 5 or 6. The swelling around your eye is concerning too. We'll want to get a CT scan to make sure there's no fracture to the orbital bone. Whatever you think is best. You're very calm, he observed. Most people in your situation would be more upset. I smiled despite the pain. I've been through worse. And I had. So much worse. This pain, this blood, this dramatic Thanksgiving disaster, was nothing compared to burying my 21-year-old daughter. Nothing compared to watching my first husband die of cancer. Nothing compared to discovering my second husband had gambled away our savings and left me with crushing debt. This was just another hard thing in a life full of hard things. Except this time, I was in control. This time, I was the one choosing the outcome. We arrived at the emergency room 20 minutes later. It was crowded. Thanksgiving always brought out the kitchen accidents and family fight injuries, but my bleeding face got me triaged quickly. They took me back to an examination room, had me lie down on a bed with crinkly paper, and a nurse came in to clean the wound. Ouch, she said sympathetically as she worked. That's nasty. What happened? Someone threw a glass at me. Her hands stilled. On purpose? Yes. Did you call the police? They were at my house when the ambulance arrived. The person who did it is being arrested as we speak. She nodded approvingly. Good. Nobody should get away with this kind of thing, family or not. Family or not. She'd assumed correctly that it was family. Because it almost always was, wasn't it? The people who hurt us worst are usually the ones we love most. While the nurse finished cleaning the wound, I pulled out my phone again. My hands were steadier now, the initial shock wearing off. I had several texts waiting. From Robert. Vivian has been booked. Bail set at $2,500. Daniel is scrambling to get the money together. Restraining order will be processed tonight. You'll have it by morning. How are you holding up? From Janet. Honey, we're still at the house giving our statements to the police. Don't worry about anything here. We'll make sure everything is documented properly. Call me when you can. Love you. From Constance. Asterisk, that girl is crazy. Can't believe she actually threw that glass. But we all saw it. You're going to be okay, Eleanor. You did the right thing. Finally standing up for yourself. Proud of you. Asterisk. And one from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk, Mom, it's Daniel. They took my phone, but I'm using Vivian's. I got her out. She's home now. We need to talk. Please call me. Asterisk. I stared at that last message for a long moment. He'd posted bail. Of course he had. Probably maxed out another credit card or borrowed money from someone. And now Vivian was back at my house, after being arrested for assaulting me. I typed a response. Asterisk, if Vivian sets foot on my property again, I will have her arrested for violating the restraining order that will be in effect by morning. You have until tomorrow night to remove all of your belongings and vacate the premises. This is not negotiable. Do not contact me again. Asterisk. I hit send and blocked the number. Then I texted Robert. Asterisk, Daniel posted Vivian's bail. She's back at the house. Is that a problem? Asterisk. His response was immediate. Asterisk, not for long. The restraining order will require her to stay away from you and your property. Once it's served, probably around 8 a.m. tomorrow, she'll have to leave immediately. If she refuses, call the police and she'll be arrested again. This actually works in our favor. Shows she has no respect for boundaries even after being arrested. Asterisk. I smiled. Robert was right. This was actually perfect. Every move they made just dug the hole deeper. The doctor came in then, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes. She examined my face carefully, took x-rays, confirmed no orbital fracture but a deep laceration that would need stitches. You're lucky, she said as she prepared to suture the wound. An inch higher and you might have lost the eye. I know. She paused, studying me. You don't seem very shaken up by this. I'm not. I knew it was coming. Her eyebrows rose. You knew someone was going to throw a glass at your face. I knew that if I pushed them far enough, they'd show their true nature. I just didn't know exactly how. She set down her instruments and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Whitfield, what you're describing sounds like you deliberately provoked this attack. I set boundaries that were reasonable and long overdue. If someone responds to reasonable boundaries with violence, that's on them, not me. She studied me for another long moment, then nodded slowly and picked up her instruments again. You're not wrong, she said quietly. But be careful. People like that, people who respond to boundaries with violence, they don't just stop. This might not be over. Oh, it's over, I said with certainty. After tonight, it's definitely over. She worked in silence, her hands steady and efficient. The local anesthetic meant I felt pressure but no pain as she stitched the wound closed. 6 stitches, just like the paramedic had predicted. She bandaged it carefully, gave me instructions for wound care, prescribed antibiotics and pain medication. You'll have a scar, she said. Not a bad one, but it'll be visible. Good, I said. Let it be visible. Let everyone see what happens when you let people exploit you for too long. She gave me an odd look but said nothing more. Just handed me my discharge papers and instructions to follow up with my primary care physician in a week to have the stitches removed. It was nearly midnight when I was finally released. Janet had driven my car to the hospital and was waiting in the lobby to take me home. She stood up when she saw me, her face crumpling with emotion. Oh, Eleanor, she whispered, gently touching my uninjured cheek. Are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine. Actually. Is it done? Did they all give statements? Yes. Constance, Dorothy, and I all gave detailed statements about exactly what we saw. The officers were very thorough. They took photos of everything, the broken glass, the wine on the tablecloth, the blood on your dress. They have your grandmother's pearls as evidence too, since they're stained with blood and wine. And the video. Janet smiled grimly. I told them about your security cameras. They're getting a warrant to review the footage. Should have it by morning. Perfect. The cameras would show everything, Vivian's rage, the deliberate throw, my lack of provocation. Everything we needed. What about Daniel and the others? Are they still at the house? They were when I left about an hour ago. All of them packed into the living room, arguing about what to do. Paul was on the phone with some lawyer. Patricia was crying. Daniel just looked broken. Good. Let him feel broken. Let him understand what it's like to lose something precious. We walked to the car in silence. The parking lot was nearly empty, most of the Thanksgiving emergencies having been treated and released. The night was cold and clear, stars visible in the sky above the streetlights. "Eleanor," Janet said as we got into the car, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you plan this? The whole thing?" I looked at her, my sister-in-law, my friend, the sister of my first husband who I'd loved more than life itself. She deserved honesty. "Yes," I said simply. "I planned it. Not the glass throwing specifically, I didn't know she'd do that. But I knew if I pushed hard enough, in front of witnesses, she'd react badly. I just needed her to react badly enough to give me legal grounds to remove them from my house immediately instead of going through months of eviction proceedings." Janet was quiet for a moment, pulling out of the parking lot and onto the empty street. Finally, she said, "I'm not sure if I should be horrified or impressed." "Be impressed," I said. "Be horrified by what they did to me for 2 years. Be impressed that I finally found the strength to fight back." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I am impressed. And I'm sorry it had to come to this. You deserved better from Daniel. From all of them." I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a throbbing pain in my face despite the medication. "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" I asked quietly. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I opened my eyes and looked out at the familiar streets of the town I'd lived in for 40 years. "I don't know. Maybe. Someday. But not until he understands what he did wrong. And I don't think he's capable of that right now." We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we pulled up to my house, all the lights were still on. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains, the parasites still infesting my home. But not for much longer. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Janet asked. I shook my head. "No. I need to face this alone. But thank you. For everything. For being a witness, for driving me home, for always being there when I needed you." She hugged me carefully, mindful of my injury. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I mean it, Eleanor." I watched her drive away, then took a deep breath and walked up to my front door. My house. My home. The place I'd built and maintained and protected for decades. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of reclaiming it. But tonight, I just needed to survive one more night under the same roof with the people who hated me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was silent, but I knew they were there. Probably in the living room, huddled together, plotting their next move. Good. Let them plot. It wouldn't change anything. I locked the door behind me and headed straight for the stairs. But I only made it 3 steps before Daniel emerged from the living room. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I turned slowly to face him. "There's nothing to talk about, Daniel. I said everything I needed to say at dinner. Before your wife assaulted me. It was an accident." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the excuses. I'm tired of all of it. You have until tomorrow night to be gone. That's it. That's all I have left to say to you. You can't just throw us out on the street." "I'm not throwing you out on the street. I'm evicting you from my property with 24 hours notice, which is more than generous considering your wife committed assault and battery against me tonight." Vivian appeared behind him, her face puffy from crying but her eyes still hard. "You planned this," she hissed. "You manipulated the whole situation to make me look bad." I actually laughed. It hurt my face, but I couldn't help it. "I didn't have to make you look bad, Vivian. You did that all on your own when you threw a glass at my face. I simply created the circumstances that revealed who you really are." "You're a monster," she spat. "No," I said calmly. "I'm a woman who finally stopped letting herself be victimized. There's a difference." I turned and continued up the stairs, ignoring their voices calling after me, ignoring their demands that I come back and discuss this reasonably. There was nothing reasonable about any of this anymore. There was only survival and victory and the cold satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. In my room, my reclaimed master bedroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, suddenly shaking. The adrenaline was completely gone now, leaving me hollow and aching and more tired than I'd ever been in my life. But I'd done it. Phase 1 was complete. Vivian had been arrested. The restraining order was being processed. By morning, I'd have legal grounds to remove them all from my property. I changed out of my blood-stained dress and into comfortable pajamas. Washed my face carefully around the bandage. Took my pain medication. Then I climbed into my own bed, in my room, and pulled the covers up to my chin. Tomorrow would bring phase 2. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, I fell asleep knowing that the end was finally in sight. I woke to the sound of pounding on my bedroom door. For a moment, I was disoriented, the pain in my face a sharp reminder of yesterday's events before my mind fully processed what had happened. The digital clock on my nightstand read 7:14 a.m. too early for civilized conversation. But then again, nothing about this situation was civilized anymore. Mom. Daniel's voice, urgent and angry. Mom, open the door. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body protesting. The pain medication had worn off during the night, and my face throbbed with each heartbeat. I shuffled to the bathroom mirror and studied the damage. My left eye was swollen nearly shut, ringed with purple and yellow bruising. The bandage covering my stitches was clean and white, a stark contrast to the multicolored devastation around it. I looked exactly like what I was, a victim of domestic violence. Perfect. The pounding continued. Mom. I know you're awake. Open the door. Give me a minute, I called out, my voice raspy from sleep. I brushed my teeth carefully, avoiding the left side of my face. Took more pain medication. Changed into comfortable clothes, jeans and a soft sweater, nothing fancy. Then I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Daniel. 2 from an unknown number. Probably Vivian using someone else's phone since I'd blocked hers. 7 texts, all from Daniel, escalating in desperation. Asterisk mom please answer asterisk. Asterisk we need to talk before you do something you'll regret asterisk. Asterisk Vivian wants to apologize asterisk. Asterisk the police called, they're coming at 8 am asterisk. Asterisk please don't do this asterisk. Asterisk think about what you're doing to this family asterisk. Asterisk I'm begging you asterisk. I deleted them all without responding. There was also a text from Robert, sent at 6:47 a.m. Asterisk emergency restraining order approved and signed by Judge Morrison at 6:30 a.m. Sheriff's deputies will serve it at 8 a.m. They'll ensure compliance and help supervise the removal of the respondents from your property. I'll be there at 8:15 a.m. How are you feeling? Asterisk. I typed back. Asterisk sore but satisfied. Thank you for everything, Robert. I'll see you at 8:15. Asterisk. The pounding started again. Mom. Please. They're coming to serve Vivian with a restraining order. Please don't make her leave. Where is she supposed to go? I unlocked the door and opened it. Daniel stood there looking like he hadn't slept all night, his hair disheveled, his eyes red and bloodshot, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Behind him, I could see Vivian hovering in the hallway, her face a mask of fear and fury. Good morning, Daniel, I said calmly. I'd offer you coffee, but you'll need to make it yourself. I'm not your servant. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's what you have to say? Coffee? Mom, look at what you're doing. You're destroying everything. No, I corrected. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. By having my wife arrested? By getting a restraining order that's going to force her to leave? Yes. Exactly that. She assaulted me, Daniel. She threw a glass at my face and caused injuries requiring medical treatment. The legal system is simply responding appropriately to a crime. Vivian pushed past Daniel, getting right in my face. Too close, aggressive, trying to intimidate me. I stood my ground. You set me up, she hissed. You deliberately provoked me in front of witnesses so you could play the victim. I set boundaries, I replied evenly. You responded with violence. Those were your choices, not mine. You can't make me leave. I live here. Actually, I can and I am. The restraining order being served in, I check my watch, about 40 minutes will legally require you to stay away from me and my property. If you refuse to leave, you'll be arrested again. Your choice. Her hand twitched, and for a moment I thought she might hit me again. But she saw me watching, saw the cameras I'd pointed out weeks ago, though they were actually hidden and she'd never found the real ones, and managed to control herself. Come on, Viv, Daniel said, pulling her back. Let's go pack. We'll figure this out. They retreated down the hall, whispering urgently. I heard Patricia and Paul's door open, heard the four of them gathering in the guest room for what I imagine was a frantic strategy session. I went downstairs and made coffee, moving through my kitchen with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in 2 years. My kitchen. My coffee maker. My morning routine, uninterrupted by demands or complaints or passive-aggressive comments. The house was a disaster from yesterday's abandoned Thanksgiving. The dining room table still had dried wine and blood on the tablecloth. Dishes sat half-eaten, the food congealed and cold. My beautiful turkey, carved but mostly uneaten, sat in its roasting pan on the counter. Such a waste. But also such a perfect metaphor, something beautiful and carefully prepared, destroyed by violence and chaos. I didn't clean it. Let them see it. Let the deputies see it when they arrived. More evidence of the disaster they'd created. At exactly 8 a.m., there was a firm knock at the front door. I opened it to find 2 sheriff's deputies, an older man with a graying mustache and a younger woman who looked fresh out of the academy. They both had serious expressions and official-looking paperwork. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield? The older deputy asked. Yes. I'm Deputy Harrison, this is Deputy Chen. I winced internally at the name but said nothing. We're here to serve an emergency restraining order on Vivian Hartley. Is she on the premises? She is. Upstairs in the guest room with my son and her parents. May we come in? Please. I stepped aside and let them enter. They took in the scene, the destroyed dining room, the chaos of yesterday's dinner, and most importantly, my bruised and bandaged face. Deputy Harrison's expression darkened. She did that to you? He asked, gesturing to my injury. Yes. Last night during Thanksgiving dinner. Threw a crystal wine glass at my face in front of multiple witnesses. And she posted bail and came back here. My son posted her bail. Yes, she came back to my house. Where I live. Where she assaulted me. Deputy Chen was already taking notes. That shows a pattern of disregard for boundaries and legal consequences, she observed. That's putting it mildly, I said. Deputy Harrison nodded. All right. Can you call them down here, or should we go up? I'll call them. I walked to the base of the stairs. Daniel. Vivian. There are sheriff's deputies here to see you. Please come downstairs. Silence. Then hurried footsteps and urgent whispers. Finally, all 4 of them appeared at the top of the stairs, Daniel looking terrified, Vivian defiant, Patricia crying dramatically, and Paul red-faced and angry. They came down slowly, like condemned prisoners walking to their execution. Which, in a way, they were. Vivian Marie Hartley. Deputy Harrison asked formally. Yes, she whispered. You've been named as the respondent in an emergency restraining order filed by Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield. I'm here to serve you with this order and explain its terms. He held out a thick envelope. Vivian took it with shaking hands. What does this mean? It means you're legally required to stay at least 100 yards away from Mrs. Whitfield and her property at all times. You cannot contact her directly or indirectly. You cannot come to this residence. Violation of this order is a criminal offense that will result in your immediate arrest. But I live here. Vivian's voice rose. This is my home. This is Mrs. Whitfield's home, Deputy Chen corrected firmly. You've been residing here as a guest. That guest status has been revoked due to your assault on the homeowner. I have rights. You can't just throw me out on the street. You assaulted someone in their own home. You're fortunate you're not being held without bail. This restraining order is in effect immediately. You need to gather your essential belongings and vacate the premises within the next 2 hours. 2 hours. Patricia shrieked. That's not enough time. We have years' worth of belongings here. Deputy Harrison turned to me. Mrs. Whitfield, are you willing to allow them additional time to remove their belongings under supervised conditions? I pretended to consider it. I'll give them until 6 p.m. today. That's 10 hours. All belongings must be removed by then. After that, anything remaining becomes abandoned property and I'll dispose of it as I see fit. That's reasonable, Deputy Harrison said. You hear that, folks? You have until 6 p.m. today. We'll note it in our report. This is insane. Paul shouted. You can't let her get away with this. She deliberately provoked the situation. Sir, Deputy Chen said sharply, Mrs. Whitfield set boundaries in her own home. Ms. Hartley responded by assaulting her. Nothing Mrs. Whitfield said or did justifies physical violence. If you continue to argue, we can discuss obstruction charges. Paul's mouth snapped shut. Daniel had been silent through all of this, but now he stepped forward. Mom, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this to Vivian. She made a mistake, she's sorry. She's not sorry, I interrupted. She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry there are consequences. But she's not sorry for what she did. And neither are you, apparently, since you keep defending her instead of acknowledging that she assaulted your mother. I'm not defending what she did, but... Yes, you are. Every time you make an excuse, every time you try to minimize it, every time you ask me to drop the charges or withdraw the restraining order, you're defending it. You're telling me that your wife's violence is acceptable, that I should just tolerate it to keep the peace. That's not. It is. And I'm done. Vivian, you have until 6 p.m. to remove your belongings. Daniel, since you're not named in the restraining order, you can stay if you choose. But if Vivian comes back here for any reason, I'll have her arrested. Do you all understand? Vivian was crying now, angry, frustrated tears. Where am I supposed to go? We don't have money for a hotel. My parents don't have money. You're leaving us homeless. You have options, I said coldly. Friends, family, a homeless shelter, a women's crisis center. Oh wait, that's for actual victims of domestic violence, not perpetrators. You'll figure something out. You always do. Robert arrived then, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. He took in the scene, the deputies, the family drama, my bruised face, and nodded with satisfaction. Morning, Eleanor. Deputies. He shook hands with Harrison and Chen. Robert Morrison, Mrs. Whitfield's attorney. Everything proceeding smoothly. Order has been served, Deputy Harrison confirmed. Respondent has been given until 6 p.m. to remove her belongings. Excellent. Mrs. Whitfield, I need you to sign a few documents confirming you're not allowing Ms. Hartley back on the property after the deadline. Standard procedure. While I reviewed and signed the papers Robert had brought, the deputies supervised the family's retreat upstairs to start packing. I could hear Vivian sobbing loudly, dramatically, like she was performing her grief for an audience. Maybe she was. Maybe she thought if she seemed pathetic enough, I'd change my mind. She didn't understand yet. The Eleanor who would have changed her mind, who would have given in to guilt and manipulation, who would have sacrificed herself for family. That woman was gone. She died yesterday when my son called me selfish while I was bleeding. How are you really doing? Robert asked quietly once we were alone. Honestly, I feel free. Lighter. Like I've been carrying a massive weight for 2 years and it's finally been lifted. No regrets. About Vivian? None. About Daniel? I paused. I regret that it came to this. I regret that he became someone I don't recognize. But I don't regret protecting myself. Good. Because this next part might be harder. Phase 2. He nodded. We need to discuss your finances. If Daniel has had access to your accounts, credit cards, any financial instruments, we need to audit everything and lock him out. Today. I'd been expecting this. Hoping to avoid thinking about it, but expecting it. How bad do you think it is? I don't know yet. That's what we need to find out. Do you have all your financial statements? In my office. I'll get them. We spent the next hour going through my finances, and it was worse than I'd feared. Much worse. Daniel and Vivian had opened credit cards in my name, somehow gotten approved using my information and their address. 4 cards total, all maxed out. Nearly $47,000 in debt I hadn't even known existed. They'd been making small withdrawals from my savings account, never enough to trigger alerts, just $200 here, $300 there. Over 2 years, it added up to almost $15,000. My retirement account showed a loan against it for $25,000. I hadn't taken out that loan. But somehow, using forged documents or stolen information or some method I couldn't even fathom, someone had. The paperwork listed Daniel as an authorized agent on the account. I'd never signed anything making him an authorized agent. In total, Robert estimated, they'd stolen or fraudulently obtained somewhere between $85,000 and $95,000. I sat in my office chair, staring at the numbers, feeling physically ill. Not just from the money, though that was devastating, but from the betrayal. My son. My son had systematically robbed me for 2 years. This is identity theft, Robert said grimly. This is fraud. These are serious crimes, Eleanor. What can I do? You can press charges. Report it to the police, to the credit bureaus, to your financial institutions. You can potentially recover some of the money if they have any assets, though I suspect they don't. If I report it, Daniel could go to prison. Yes, he could. I closed my eyes. This was the choice I'd been avoiding, the one I'd known was coming but hadn't wanted to face. Vivian had been easy, she'd assaulted me, and I'd defended myself. But this was different. This was me actively choosing to pursue criminal charges against my own son. I need time to think about it, I said finally. That's fair. But Eleanor, you need to secure everything immediately, regardless of whether you press charges. Cancel the fraudulent cards, freeze your credit, change every password, lock down every account. If you don't, they'll just keep taking. He was right. I knew he was right. We spent the next 2 hours on the phone with banks, credit card companies, credit bureaus. Canceling cards, disputing charges, filing fraud reports, placing freezes and alerts on everything. It was exhausting and humiliating, having to explain over and over that my own son had stolen from me. By noon, my finances were locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But the damage was done. My retirement nest egg, carefully saved over 30 years, was devastated. My credit score, always pristine, was destroyed. The financial security I'd worked my entire life to build had been stripped away by the person I'd trusted most in the world. Upstairs, I could hear the family packing. Lots of trips up and down the stairs, things being loaded into cars. Paul had apparently called a rental truck, and I heard it arrive around 1 p.m. More heavy footsteps, furniture being moved, drawers being emptied. I didn't go upstairs. Didn't supervise or check on them. Just stayed in my office with Robert, handling the endless phone calls and paperwork required to begin picking up the pieces of my destroyed financial life. Around 3 p.m., Janet called. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I told her about the financial fraud. Heard her sharp intake of breath. "Oh, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. I can't believe Daniel would do that to you." "I can," I said bitterly. "He's been doing it in small ways for 2 years. Why would I be surprised it escalated?" "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Robert thinks I should press charges. And maybe I should. Maybe that's the only way Daniel learns there are real consequences for his actions. But he's still my son. And I don't know if I can do that to him." Janet was quiet for a moment. Then, "Eleanor, honey, you need to think about what Daniel has already done to you. He moved into your house and took over your life. He let his wife abuse and disrespect you for 2 years. He defended her after she assaulted you. And now you find out he's been stealing from you, destroying your financial security. At what point does he stop being your son and start being just another criminal who hurt you?" Her words hit hard because they were true. When did blood relation stop being an excuse for tolerating the intolerable? "I need to go," I said. "I'll call you later. I love you. Remember that. You deserve better than this." I hung up and sat in silence, staring at the financial statements spread across my desk. $85,000, minimum. Maybe more as we continued to uncover the fraud. Gone. Just gone. Robert's phone rang. He answered, listened, then handed it to me. "It's Deputy Harrison. He's still at the house supervising the move-out. Says he needs to talk to you." I took the phone. "Yes, Deputy." "Mrs. Whitfield, we have a situation. Daniel Whitfield is refusing to leave with the others. He says he has a right to stay since the restraining order only applies to Vivian Hartley. Is this correct?" I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course Daniel would try this. "Technically, yes," I said. "The restraining order is only against Vivian. But I want him out too. Do you want me to serve him with a formal eviction notice? It would give him 30 days. "No. The word came out harsh, decisive. No, I don't want to wait 30 days. Robert, what are my options? Robert leaned forward. If he's not on the lease or deed, and you've verbally revoked his permission to be there, he's trespassing. But legally, since his established residency over 2 years, you'd need to go through formal eviction proceedings. Unless what? Unless he leaves voluntarily, or unless you can prove he's posed a threat to your safety, which would allow for an emergency eviction similar to the restraining order. I thought about the financial fraud, the forged documents, the identity theft that Robert had just spent hours documenting. He's committed multiple felonies against me, I said slowly. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. If I press charges, would that constitute a threat? Robert's eyes widened slightly. It could. Especially if you can argue that his continued presence in your home gives him access to more documents, more opportunities to commit further fraud. It's a strong argument. I looked at the numbers on the page again. $85,000. My retirement. My security. My future. Deputy Harrison, I said into the phone, my voice steady. Please inform Daniel that if he's not out of my house by 6 p.m. with the others, I'll be filing criminal charges against him for identity theft and fraud. And those charges will include evidence that he needs to be removed from the property to prevent further crimes. Understood. I'll relay the message. He hung up. I handed the phone back to Robert with shaking hands. Are you sure about this? Robert asked quietly. No. But I'm doing it anyway. We heard shouting from upstairs. Daniel's voice, angry and desperate. Then heavy footsteps on the stairs. He burst into my office without knocking, his face red with fury. You're threatening to have me arrested? Your own son. I stood up to face him. You stole from me, Daniel. Almost $100,000. You committed identity theft, fraud, forgery. What did you think would happen when I found out? I was going to pay you back. With what money? You don't have a job. Vivian doesn't have a job. You've been living off me like parasites for 2 years. Where exactly was this repayment going to come from? I was waiting for my promotion. You've been waiting for a promotion for 18 months. It's not coming, Daniel. You're not good at your job, you don't work hard, and you spend more time playing video games than advancing your career. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Good. Maybe the truth would hurt enough to finally get through. I needed the money, he said, his voice dropping. Vivian's business ideas required startup capital. I was investing in our future. You were stealing from my future to fund pipe dreams. And you know what the worst part is? Not the money. I can rebuild my savings eventually. The worst part is that you didn't even have the courage to ask. You just took. You snuck around, opened accounts in my name, forged my signature, stole my identity piece by piece. You treated me like a mark, not your mother. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. What do you want from me? His voice broke. What can I do to fix this? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find something worth saving. But all I saw was a weak, entitled man who'd chosen the path of least resistance at every turn. Who'd let his wife twist him into someone unrecognizable. Who'd betrayed his own mother for money to fund his wife's fantasies. I want you to leave, I said quietly. I want you out of my house by 6 p.m. I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. And I want you to get help, Daniel. Therapy, financial counseling, marriage counseling, whatever it takes to figure out how you became this person. And if I do all that, if I get help and try to fix things, then maybe someday we can have a conversation about rebuilding trust. Maybe. But that's years away, Daniel. Right now, I just need you gone. He stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Then he turned and left without another word. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Robert squeezed my shoulder. That was one of the hardest things I've ever watched someone do, he said quietly. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it needed to be done. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Both about the charges and about giving him a chance to leave voluntarily. I'm still going to file the fraud reports, even if he leaves peacefully. I need everything documented in case he tries this again. Agreed. And Eleanor? You should consider changing your will. Making sure he can't inherit anything if something happens to you before this is resolved. I hadn't even thought of that. But he was right. If I died tomorrow, everything would go to Daniel. And he'd use it to fund more of Vivian's schemes, more bad decisions, more waste. Let's do that next week, I said. Right now, I just need them gone. The next 3 hours were a strange limbo. I stayed in my office while they finished packing. Heard furniture being loaded, boxes being carried out, the rental truck's engine running. Heard Vivian crying and Patricia complaining and Paul cursing under his breath. But I also heard silence from Daniel. He'd stopped fighting. Stopped arguing. Just quietly packed his things and prepared to leave. At 5:47 p.m., there was a soft knock on my office door. Come in. It was Daniel. He looked defeated, broken. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed to enter. We're done packing, he said quietly. Everything's loaded. We'll be gone in the next few minutes. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. I know you don't want to hear this, but I am sorry. Really sorry. Not just about getting caught. About all of it. About how I treated you, about the money, about defending Vivian when I should have been protecting you. About everything. Okay, I said, because what else was there to say? I love you, Mom. Those words. Those 3 words that should have meant everything but now meant almost nothing. Because love without respect, without consideration, without basic human decency, wasn't really love at all. It was just a word people said when they wanted something. I love you too, Daniel, I said, because it was still true despite everything. But love isn't enough anymore. Not without change. He nodded, wiped his eyes, and left. I heard them all leave. The rental truck pulling away. Cars starting. Engines fading into the distance. And then, finally, silence. Deputy Harrison knocked on my office door a few minutes later. They're gone. I did a walkthrough of the house. They took all their belongings as far as I can tell. Here's my card if you need anything else. The restraining order is in effect for 6 months, renewable if needed. Thank you, Deputy. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Whitfield. And lock your doors. He left, and I was alone. Truly alone in my house for the first time in 2 years. I walked through the rooms slowly, taking inventory. The master bedroom was mine again, untouched. The guest room where Daniel and Vivian had been sleeping was empty, stripped bare. The sewing room, my former sewing room, where Paul and Patricia had stayed was also empty, though they'd left some damage. Scratches on the hardwood floor from moving furniture. A stain on the carpet. Holes in the wall where they'd hung pictures without asking. More evidence of their disrespect. More reasons I'd been right to remove them. The living room looked strange without their clutter. No video game consoles. No piles of Vivian's magazines. No Paul's ugly recliner that he'd insisted on bringing in. The kitchen was mine again. My coffee maker. My dishes. My space. I stood in the middle of my empty, reclaimed house and waited to feel something. Relief. Maybe. Satisfaction. Victory. But what I felt was grief. Not for them, not for the people they'd become, not for the relationship we'd lost. But for what could have been. For the son I'd raised who'd somehow become a stranger. For the family I'd wanted that had turned out to be an illusion. I walked to the living room and sat on my couch, in my house, and I let myself cry. Really cry, for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Cried for Amy, my daughter who'd died too young. Cried for James, my first husband who I still missed every day. Cried for the Eleanor I used to be, before loss and betrayal had hardened her into someone who could plan revenge and execute it without flinching. But I also cried with relief. Because it was over. They were gone. My house was mine again. My life was mine again. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Long enough for the sun to set, for the room to grow dark, for my tears to finally run dry. Then I stood up, wiped my eyes, and started cleaning. The Thanksgiving disaster still waited in the dining room. The dishes, the dried blood, the wine stains. The broken glass that had been saved as evidence but was now just trash. I cleaned it all. Threw away the ruined tablecloth, no point trying to save it. Washed the dishes that could be saved. Threw away the food that had spoiled. Swept up the last shards of crystal glass from my grandmother's set. By midnight, my house was clean. Not perfect, there were still stains and scratches and damage that would take time and money to repair. But it was clean. And it was mine. I made myself tea and sat at my kitchen table, the one where I'd eaten alone so many nights while they monopolized the dining room. I pulled out my journal and made one final entry for this terrible, triumphant day. Asterisk Thanksgiving night plus 1 day. They're gone. All of them. The house is empty and quiet and mine again. Phase 1 is complete. Vivian is under restraining order. Daniel is out. I've discovered approximately $85,000 in fraud and theft. I'll file the reports next week. I should feel victorious. And I do, in a way. But I also feel devastated. Because I won the battle but lost my son in the process. Maybe I lost him years ago and I'm just now accepting it. Janet asked me when blood relation stops being an excuse for tolerating the intolerable. I think I finally know the answer. When continuing to tolerate it means erasing yourself completely. When love becomes indistinguishable from abuse. When family becomes just another word for exploitation. I'm 63 years old. I've lost a daughter, 2 husbands, and now a son. But I've gained something too. Myself. My autonomy. My dignity. My home. Tomorrow, phase 2 begins. But tonight, I sleep in my own bed, in my own house, with my own peace. Asterisk. I closed the journal and went upstairs. Brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, checked the locks on all the doors and windows. Set the security system that I'd installed months ago but had never activated while they were here because they'd complained about the inconvenience. Then I climbed into my bed, in my room, in my house, and fell asleep within minutes. For the first time in 2 years, I slept through the entire night without waking once. The first week alone was strange. Not bad, just strange. I kept expecting to hear footsteps overhead, voices arguing, doors slamming. But there was only silence. Beautiful, peaceful, slightly eerie silence. I spent those first few days simply existing in my reclaimed space. Walking from room to room, touching things that were mine, sitting in chairs without wondering if someone would tell me I was in their spot. I cooked meals for one and ate them slowly, savoring the peace. I watched television shows I actually wanted to watch. I took long baths without someone pounding on the door demanding their turn. Small freedoms that I'd taken for granted before, that had been stripped away so gradually I'd barely noticed their absence until now. My face healed slowly. The stitches came out after a week, leaving a thin red scar below my left eye. It would fade eventually, the doctor said, but it would always be visible if you looked closely. I didn't mind. Let it be a reminder of the price of standing up for yourself. Let it be proof that I'd survived. The phone calls started on day 3. Daniel, calling from different numbers because I kept blocking him. I never answered. He left voicemails, apologetic, desperate, angry, manipulative by turns. I listened to the first few, then stopped. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. Vivian's lawyer sent a letter demanding I drop the restraining order and the assault charges. Robert sent back a letter listing all the evidence against her and suggesting she accept whatever plea deal the prosecutor offered. We never heard from her lawyer again. Janet visited every few days, bringing food and company. Constance came by to help me repair some of the damage Paul and Patricia had left. Dorothy from next door started inviting me over for coffee, and slowly, carefully, I began rebuilding a social life that didn't revolve around managing other people's drama. But the hardest part was dealing with the financial mess. Robert had been right. It was worse than we initially thought. Once the banks started investigating, they found more fraudulent accounts, more unauthorized loans, more charges on cards I'd never opened. The final tally was $97,342. $97,342. Stolen, borrowed, fraudulently obtained. Nearly $100,000 that should have been funding my retirement, my security, my future. Gone. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I sat in Robert's office and faced the decision I'd been avoiding. You need to press charges, he said gently. Not just for the money, though recovering even a portion of it would help. But for the principle. For the record. For your protection. If I pressed charges against Daniel for fraud, he could go to prison. Yes. He could. Probably not a long sentence for a first offense, especially if he cooperates and shows remorse. But yes, there would be consequences. I stared at the file folder containing all the evidence. Bank statements, credit reports, forged documents. It was all there, meticulously documented, irrefutable. What if he's learned his lesson? I asked quietly. What if going through this whole experience has already been enough to change him? Robert leaned back in his chair. Eleanor, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. In the 2 weeks since they left, has Daniel taken any real responsibility for what he did? I thought about it. About the voicemails that always included a but or an excuse. About how he'd blamed Vivian for making him steal. About how he'd suggested I was partially at fault for not giving them more money voluntarily. No, I admitted. He's sorry he got caught. Sorry there are consequences. But he hasn't actually acknowledged that what he did was wrong. He still thinks he was justified because we're family. Then he hasn't learned anything. And if you don't press charges, you're sending him the message that family means he can victimize you without real consequences. You're teaching him that there's a level of betrayal that's acceptable as long as you're related. Put that way, the choice became clearer. File the police report, I said. Press charges. All of them. Robert nodded and pulled out the paperwork. I spent the next hour signing documents, giving statements, authorizing the police to investigate. It felt surreal, formally accusing my own son of crimes against me. But it also felt necessary. Like setting a broken bone. Painful, but required for healing. The police came to take my statement 2 days later. A detective named Ramirez, middle-aged and professional, who listened to everything without judgment. These are serious charges, Mrs. Whitfield, he said when I'd finished. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. If we can prove your son committed these crimes, he's looking at felony charges. Multiple counts. Do you understand what that means for him? It means he'll finally face consequences for his actions, I said firmly. It also means he'll have a criminal record. It could affect his employment, his ability to get credit, his entire future. Detective Ramirez, he stole almost $100,000 from me. He forged my signature on loan documents. He opened credit cards in my name and maxed them out. He systematically defrauded his own mother over a 2-year period. What he did has affected my employment prospects, my credit, my entire future. Why should I protect him from consequences when he didn't protect me from harm? Ramirez nodded slowly. Fair point. I'll start the investigation. We'll need to collect evidence, interview witnesses, build the case. It could take a few months. Are you prepared for that? Yes. And you understand that once we arrest him, there's no taking it back? Once charges are filed, it's out of your hands. The state presses charges, not you. You can't change your mind and make it go away. I understand. He stood up and shook my hand. I'll be in touch as the investigation progresses. In the meantime, keep all documentation secure. Don't communicate with your son about the case. And Mrs. Whitfield? For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Family doesn't get a free pass to destroy you. After he left, I sat in my living room and wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. If years from now, I'd regret this moment. If there was any chance that Daniel could have turned things around without the nuclear option of criminal prosecution. But then I remembered the $85,000. The forged signatures. The years of manipulation and exploitation. The way he'd called me selfish while I was bleeding. No. This was right. Hard. But right. The holidays were lonely that year. My first Christmas without Daniel since he was born. I'd always imagined I'd spend my golden years with grandchildren, with family gatherings, with the warmth and chaos of a house full of people who loved each other. Instead, I spent Christmas Eve with Janet and her family. Christmas Day with Constance and her daughter. Boxing Day alone in my quiet house, eating leftovers and watching old movies and trying not to think about what might have been. But I also wasn't miserable. The loneliness was painful, yes, but it was clean. Honest. Better than the toxic presence of people who claimed to love me while actively harming me. Janet's grandson, a thoughtful boy of 8 named Tommy, asked me why I had a scar on my face. Before Janet could shush him, I knelt down and told him the truth. Someone I loved hurt me, I said simply, and I had to make them leave so they wouldn't hurt me again. That's sad, Tommy said. Did it work? Are you safe now? Yes, sweetheart. I'm safe now. He hugged me then, This small child who barely knew me, offering comfort in the uncomplicated way that only children can. And I realized something important. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up, who cared, who offered hugs when you needed them. Daniel never showed up. Not for Christmas, not for New Year's, not for the entire holiday season. He called a few more times, always blocked. Sent a card that I threw away without reading. But he never came to my door to actually face me. Vivian violated the restraining order in January. Showed up at my house at 2 a.m, drunk or high or both, pounding on my door and screaming that I'd ruined her life. I called 911 without even getting out of bed. The police arrived within 5 minutes and arrested her. She spent the night in jail. The restraining order was extended for another year. And I slept peacefully, knowing the system was working. In February, Detective Ramirez called. "We have enough evidence to file charges against Daniel Whitfield," he said. "Multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and forgery. The district attorney is moving forward with prosecution. He'll be arrested within the next few days." My hands started shaking. "Okay," I whispered. "I need to ask you one more time. Are you certain you want to proceed? Once we arrest him, once charges are filed, this becomes a criminal case. There's no going back." I thought about everything. The manipulation, the theft, the betrayal. The way he'd chosen Vivian over me again and again. The way he'd never truly taken responsibility. "I'm certain," I said. "All right. I'll keep you updated." They arrested Daniel on a Tuesday morning at his new apartment, a tiny studio in a bad part of town that he was sharing with Vivian despite the restraining order that prohibited them from living together. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was arraigned, charged, and released on bail that Vivian's parents somehow scraped together. But now he had a court date. Now there would be a trial. Now there would be consequences. The guilt hit me in waves. Lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering if I was destroying my son's life. Wondering if I was being vindictive rather than just. Wondering if there was a better way I hadn't considered. But then I'd remember the numbers. $97,000. Years of manipulation. The wine glass smashing into my face. And the guilt would transform back into righteous anger. I started seeing a therapist in March. Dr. Susan Chen. Damn it, why was that name everywhere? Dr. Susan Williams. A kind woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. "You're experiencing cognitive dissonance," she explained during our 3rd session. "Part of you knows you did the right thing by protecting yourself and holding Daniel accountable. But another part of you has been trained for 34 years to prioritize your son's well-being over your own. Those two parts are in conflict. So what do I do?" You keep reminding yourself of the facts. Not how you feel about the facts, but the facts themselves. Your son committed crimes against you. Multiple felonies. Those crimes caused you significant financial and emotional harm. Pressing charges isn't punishment, it's accountability. It's the natural consequence of his choices, not yours. It helped, having someone validate my decision. Having someone who wasn't family or financially invested confirm that I wasn't being cruel or vindictive. That I was simply refusing to be a victim anymore. In April, Daniel's lawyer contacted Robert with a plea deal offer. If I agreed to drop the charges or provide a victim impact statement supporting leniency, Daniel would plead guilty to reduce charges, pay restitution, and serve probation instead of prison time. "What do you want to do?" Robert asked. I thought about it for 3 days. Weighed the options. Considered the consequences. "No deal," I finally said. "If he wants leniency, he can earn it by actually taking responsibility. Full responsibility, not just pleading guilty to reduce charges. I want him to stand in front of a judge and explain exactly what he did and why it was wrong. I want him to acknowledge the harm he caused. And I want him to mean it." "That's a hard line to draw," Robert said carefully. "If this goes to trial, there's always a chance he could be acquitted." "Then he'll be acquitted. But I won't help him avoid consequences by minimizing what he did." Robert drafted a response declining the plea deal. 2 weeks later, they came back with a better offer. Daniel would plead guilty to the original charges, make full restitution over 10 years, serve 6 months in county jail, and provide a detailed written admission of everything he'd done. "This is as good as it gets," Robert said. "Full accountability, jail time, restitution. It's everything you asked for." I read through the proposed plea agreement. It was thorough, detailed, damning. Daniel would have to admit to every fraudulent account, every forged signature, every lie. It would all be part of the official court record. Okay, I said. I'll accept this. The plea hearing was scheduled for June. 6 months after Thanksgiving. 6 months since my life had imploded and reformed into something new. I didn't attend the hearing. Couldn't bear to see Daniel stand in front of a judge and admit what he'd done. Robert went and called me afterward with the results. He took the plea, Robert said. Pled guilty to all charges. The judge accepted it. He'll surrender himself to serve his jail sentence in 2 weeks. Restitution payments will start once he's released. Did he say anything? At the hearing? Yes. The judge asked if he wanted to make a statement. Daniel said. Robert paused. He said he was deeply sorry for what he'd done to you. That he'd betrayed your trust and your love. That he understood why you'd pressed charges and that he deserved every consequence. He said he hoped someday you might forgive him, but that he'd understand if you never did. Tears burned in my eyes. Did he mean it? I don't know, Eleanor. I hope so. For his sake. So did I. Despite everything, I hoped my son had finally learned something from this nightmare. Hoped that 6 months in jail would give him time to think, to reflect, to become someone better. But I also knew it didn't matter whether he'd learned or not. What mattered was that I'd drawn a line. I'd said this far and no further. I'd chosen myself over the comfortable lie of toxic family bonds. 2 weeks later, Daniel began serving his sentence. Vivian, unsurprisingly, left him within a month. Moved back to Arizona with her parents, leaving him to face the consequences alone. Part of me felt bad about that. But a larger part thought it was exactly what he deserved. He'd chosen her over me, over truth, over doing the right thing. Now he got to learn what that choice really meant. I spent the summer rebuilding. Not just my finances, though Robert had helped me set up payment plans for the fraudulent debts and negotiate settlements with the credit card companies. But rebuilding myself. My sense of identity beyond being Daniel's mother. My interests and hobbies. My friendships. I joined a book club. Started volunteering at the local animal shelter. Took a painting class at the community college. Small things that made me remember who I'd been before marriage and motherhood had defined me. Before loss and betrayal had hardened me. The scar on my face faded but never disappeared completely. Sometimes I'd catch sight of it in the mirror and remember that terrible Thanksgiving. The wine glass. The blood. The moment everything changed. But I didn't hate the scar. It was proof that I'd survived. Proof that I'd fought back. Proof that when pushed far enough, I'd finally chosen myself. In August, I received the first restitution check from Daniel. $50. A pathetically small amount compared to what he'd stolen, but it was something. An acknowledgement. A beginning. I deposited it and moved on with my life. By the time autumn arrived, I'd been alone in my house for nearly a year. The anniversary of that terrible Thanksgiving was approaching, and I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. My finances were slowly recovering. Between the restitution payments and my own careful budgeting, I'd managed to rebuild about $15,000 in savings. It would take years to recover the rest, but I was making progress. That was enough. The house felt like mine again. I'd repainted the guest room, the one where Paul and Patricia had stayed. Couldn't stand looking at the walls they'd scuffed and stained. Now it was a soft sage green, peaceful and clean. I'd converted my old sewing room back to its original purpose, buying new supplies to replace what had been lost or damaged. Small acts of reclamation. Small victories. Janet's family invited me to their Thanksgiving that year, but I declined. Not because I was bitter or isolated, but because I wanted to spend the day on my own terms. Remembering, processing, acknowledging how far I'd come. I cooked a small turkey, just for me. Made all the traditional sides. Set my grandmother's table with the china that had survived, the silver that couldn't be broken. Lit candles and said grace and allowed myself to feel whatever emotions came. Grief for what might have been. Pride in what I'd survived. Hope for what might still come. I was 70 years from perfect, but I was free. And freedom, I'd learned, was worth almost any price. Daniel was released from jail in December. 6 months served, good behavior earned him early release. He called me from a halfway house, Asked if we could meet. I said no. Not never, but not yet. I wasn't ready. Might not be ready for years. And that was okay. I didn't owe him forgiveness on his timeline. But I did write him a letter. Took me 3 drafts to get it right, to say what I needed to say without cruelty but also without false hope. Daniel, I received your request to meet. I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but not now. I need you to understand something. I don't regret pressing charges. I don't regret the restraining order against Vivian. I don't regret removing all of you from my home. Those were necessary acts of self-preservation, and I'd make the same choices again. What I do regret is that it came to that. I regret that you became someone who would steal from your own mother. I regret that I enabled it by not setting boundaries sooner. I regret that we both failed each other in different ways. I hope your time in jail taught you something real. I hope you're getting help, therapy, financial counseling, whatever you need to become someone better. I hope you're taking responsibility not just legally but personally for the harm you caused. But mostly, I hope you're learning to be someone who doesn't need a victim. Someone who can stand on his own without exploiting the people who love him. Because until you become that person, there's no relationship for us to rebuild. I do still love you. But I love myself too now. Finally. And I won't sacrifice myself for you ever again. Mom. I mailed the letter and felt lighter. Not because I expected it to fix anything, but because I'd said my piece. Set my boundary. Made it clear where things stood. His response came 3 weeks later. Short, handwritten, tear-stained in places. Mom. You're right about everything. I became someone I hate. Someone Dad would be ashamed of. Someone Amy would have called out years ago. I'm in therapy now. Going to financial counseling. Working a shitty job but working honestly for the first time in years. Paying the restitution every month, even though $50 barely makes a dent. I don't know if I'll ever be the son you deserved. But I'm trying to be someone I can respect. That's all I can promise right now. I'm sorry. For everything. And I understand if you never want to see me again. Daniel. I read the letter multiple times, searching for manipulation, for excuses, for the Daniel who'd betrayed me. But all I found was pain and humility and what seemed like genuine remorse. Maybe he was finally learning. Maybe jail had broken through his defenses in a way my words never could. Maybe losing everything, his mother, his wife, his freedom, his future, had finally taught him what his choices cost. Or maybe this was just another phase, another performance. I didn't know. Couldn't know. What I did know was that I was okay either way. If Daniel truly changed and we eventually rebuilt some kind of relationship, that would be good. If he didn't change and we never spoke again, I'd survive that too. I was no longer defined by being his mother. I was Eleanor Whitfield, 64 years old, scarred but strong, alone but not lonely, moving forward into whatever came next. And that was enough. To everyone watching, thank you for staying with me through this whole story. I know it wasn't an easy one to hear. But if you've ever been in a situation where family took advantage of you, where love became manipulation, where boundaries felt impossible to set, I hope my story gave you some courage. You deserve respect. You deserve safety. You deserve a life that's yours, not one defined by other people's needs and demands. Standing up for yourself might cost you relationships. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But staying silent costs you something too. Yourself. Don't wait until you're bleeding on Thanksgiving to fight back. Don't wait until you've been stolen from, lied to, exploited beyond repair. Set those boundaries now. Say no now. Choose yourself now. And if people call you selfish for it, let them. Selfish just means you understand that you matter too. Before you go, please check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about people who refused to be victims, who fought back, who chose themselves when everyone else chose to use them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding. And remember, no matter what you're going through, you're stronger than you think. You can survive more than you imagine. And on the other side of standing up for yourself is a freedom worth every difficult moment it took to get there. Asterisk. Take care of yourselves. You're worth it. Asterisk.